What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Chantelle Little of Tiller. You can find them at tillerdigital.com. And Chantelle, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, a few of my favorites and fan favorites are Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey has a Second Bite podcast. He pairs private equity with agencies. So he helps sell agencies. Second bite, because sometimes those agencies make more on the second bite than the first because they sell to private equity sells again, and they have a nice payday there. So it's a really good episode talking about the valuation space, the agency space. Another good one was Kevin Hurrigan of Spinutech. He's at an agency since 1995. So it was really interesting to hear the landscape of the internet business and the agency space since then. Jason Swank also was on talking about how he built his agency up to 8 figures, then sold it, and then he had been buying up agencies. So those have been interesting, really interesting episodes. And check out more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Chantelle, kind of like what you do with the SaaS companies, we are the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content and amazing relationships. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I have a lot of free resources and podcast episodes about podcasting too. So check it out. I am excited to introduce Chantelle Little. She's the founder and CEO of Tiller. Tiller is a web and brand agency serving B2B software brands. She founded Tiller in 2008 at just 19 years old. Right? You still look really young, Chantelle, so you've aged well.
Thank you.
She has scaled it to a multi-million-dollar agency with clients across Canada and the US. She was named Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year Prairie's finalist. It's really impressive. I mean, that's among the elite of elite. If anyone knows, like the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year awards, very difficult. So it's pretty amazing what you've done there. So I'm excited to share what you do and your company with Tiller. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Let's start off and just talk about Tiller and what you do. And as you do that, I'm going to pull up the Tiller website. I mean, it's only appropriate because you help people with user experience, web, and everything in between, CRO. So I'm going to share it, but tell us about Tiller.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. At Tiller, as you noted, we are a B2B software agents or a B2B software agency. We largely help clients out with web and branding work, but we also help out on the product side. We have a mix of clients that span from early stage startup through the scale up phase up to the enterprise level. And we've been in business for, like you said, 16 years now. So I love serving clients at various technical solutions and trying to help them articulate their message to the world and appeal to their target audience. So, and I have to say, we're redesigning our website right now. So while you're showing this off, it's about to get way better. So.
I love it. You know, what I like to hear about is from the services side. Right now, you can see, you know, obviously we're on the site here. You can see process, web, brand, sales enablement, product, CRO. When you first started, a little bit of the evolution of the services side, where did you start? What was the service when you first started?
It actually started with little explainer videos. So I was really had a summer job, that kind of gave me an opportunity to do this in the HR space. And I basically created these little paper people videos is what I described them as, and took complex products and tried to break them down into simple stories, and then use these paper cutouts and stop motion video to help articulate a story to HR managers. Did that as part of a summer job. That's what inspired me. I loved the storytelling part of marketing, and that inspired me to start Tiller. So started out with those videos, but it was 6 months later that I started to dabble in the website, because of course we have YouTube and Vimeo and other things like that at the time. Now we have way more video platforms, but I felt like the website was a great place to have those videos live. So why not expand into the web? So from that point, web has been our primary bread and butter. And our clients have really been the reason that we've expanded beyond that into brand and sales enablement, CRO, all those different pieces. So that's kind of a bit of the evolution.
So the web's kind of the gateway drug to Tiller Digital, you'd say.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. You got it. Yeah. And actually it was pivotal in our niche focus towards serving B2B SaaS, because it's so central. We have recently been calling the website the beating heart of B2B SaaS, right? Because there's so much emphasis on the performance of the website in terms of customer acquisition as well as retention. So that has been what we have really built it's kind of the hub in the middle of the wheel for Tiller in terms of service offering.
I've had the website up in my browser, Chantelle, all day. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because it's, I'll have like multiple screens here, and it will keep catching my eye because of these movement of these almost like molecules. Can you talk
Yeah.
about some of the decisions on the design on your website? Because I know you think things through a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our brand narrative really starts with the name of the company, and that's Tiller, of course. And we named the company after some people have the brand story of tilling the soil and growing things, and that's one brand story. But another one is that a tiller, for those that don't know, is actually attached to the rudder on a boat and is instrumental in steering a ship. So we really fell in love with that story, because we believe that as our client's agency partner, we're helping them navigate new territory. And so when we were thinking about how to bring that story to life visually, we wanted to tell a story of different landscapes. And we have this grid element that is used in the brand that kind of explains that there's a pathway to get from point A to B. And then those shapes and those elements are essentially the moving parts, and we help clients kind of guide them through different landscapes and help them navigate different territories. So that's kind of the general storyline of it, is navigation and direction and leadership.
I love it. It's almost like, to me, I was thinking, oh, it's the subconscious. It's telling me to like scroll down the page because those
Yes.
molecules are moving. So I'm like, okay, I'll do what the website is telling me.
Yeah. Yeah, directional design. So that's a good catch. Yeah, there's definitely ways to use design to help guide users through the journey for sure.
So the services side I can see.
Yeah.
Talk about the niche part.
Yeah.
And like when you first started out, what type of clients, and now obviously you specialize in B2B SaaS.
Yeah, absolutely. So my very first client was actually a pet food store. Thanks to my uncle who helped me secure my first client back in the day at age 19. And so in the early days, we were the agency for all. I mean, we worked with clients in the oil and gas space, restaurants, retail, whatever it might be. It was very, very broad. And it was interesting because I always liked the variety that provided, but it became really challenging because all of those different industries and companies had varying needs, right? We were serving like B2C, B2B, and then varying levels of sophistication and importance placed on the website. So I actually read a book called Niche Down one summer, and it talked about the concept of how it feels counterintuitive that if you niche down, it would be the very thing that would help you scale up. But that really stuck out to me. And I started to think more about that. And we in 2015 had started to work with some B2B SaaS companies out of Vancouver. And I'd really fallen in love with the unique challenges that B2B SaaS companies faced. in terms of articulating their offering. For example, it's usually quite complex, and how do you distill that and explain it in a simple way? How do you, bring the values and the benefits to the forefront instead of just talking about features, those kinds of things. And so really fell in love with those challenges, had quite a bit of experience. And in 2019, I read this book. 2020, we decided that we were going to actually take the leap and niche down, focusing on the B2B SaaS space, and start to not serve everybody and become the agency for B2B SaaS. And it was, on one hand, just wonderful timing for us, because doing that it happened just before COVID. And while so many companies were impacted negatively by COVID, I think our decision to niche down at that time really led to a lot of our scale and our growth, because there was a ton of shift towards online tools and platforms, and there was a need for the website became more and more central, right? So we really helped companies with that. So yeah, we decided to niche down 2020, and we've been doing it ever since. Some of our clients have B2C audiences and B2G audiences, but primarily B2B focus.
Was the book niche down, Christopher Lochhead and Heather Clancy? Is that
You got it.
Is this the book here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Love it. Actually, it's funny because I did have
Absolutely.
Chris on my podcast before, so people can check that out.
Oh, really?
And it's a fantastic. I thought that was the one, but
Yeah,
people check it out. Niche
it's a
down.
really good book.
I love it. So I love hearing that journey for the services side, the evolution of actually the niche.
Mhm.
I want to talk about sacrifice for a second and talk about $30 a week and what that means.
Well, it's been a tough road for me as an entrepreneur. And so early on, I started my business with some scholarship money. And I bought a MacBook Pro, and it was pretty low entry costs into the market. But I really struggled in my early years. And I think in part, I just lacked so much experience, and I'm kind of the school of hard knocks. So it got really tough for a season there, and I was struggling to keep the company afloat. And I mean, for the first 8 or so years, the number of times I almost went bankrupt is more times than I can count, probably. It was just kind of waking up on Monday, trying to figure out how I'd make payroll on Friday, and it was really, really tough. So I think you're referring to my very lean grocery budgets and other things of that nature, because I got creative. I got creative with my banana and oatmeal, eating the same thing every day, and just having to really budget personally and sacrifice a lot and not draw much money from the company, really just to survive all of that. And thankfully, along my journey, I was introduced to some folks, for example, hired a fractional CFO that helped me learn a lot about cash flow management and financial management. And that was instrumental, because at that point, it really helped me figure out how to scale Tiller without me having to figure out how to not eat. But it was super tough for many, many years. So I learned a lot about grit at that time, and sacrifice, for sure.
Chantelle, what kept you going during those times, as opposed to going, listen, I'm smart. I can you could probably get a job at an enterprise and have good benefits, make a good salary. What kept you going with the company?
I love that question. I think it's a few things. I think one was my dream. I was dreaming big then. I feel like I dream way bigger now. But at that point, I had a dream. I had a vision of what I wanted to create. And I think that despite all of the difficulties, I wanted to make it happen. Like, it was just like at the core of me, it was kind of like it felt fulfilling to wake up and work on it, as hard as it was, because I just believed that if I didn't give up, that one day I would realize that vision and that dream. So I think that's part of it. But I'm also very relationship and people driven. And I think that ultimately, by far, now and then, my team and my clients are the driver. Like, I didn't want to let my team down. I didn't want the company to fail. I didn't want them to not have jobs. I didn't want them to not be able to be compensated. It's like, I didn't want to let them down. And even today, that's the top driver for me as a leader. I want to continue to scale Tiller so that it creates a better future for our clients, and it creates a better future for our team. And that really drives me.
What's in it? You mentioned you dream bigger now.
Mm,
What's an example of maybe where your vision has expanded where you were before?
yeah. I think I've always thought that I dreamed big, but I realized at some point in my kind of late 20s that I had a lot of limiting beliefs. So while I dreamed big, there were a ton of constraints on my dreams. For example, I could never lead a company of more than 20 people, or I could never, I remember the day that I thought, oh, I could never sell more than $1 million in business in a year, and then you do 3 million and you're like, whoa, like, I guess I could do that. So it's I think that there were just so many limits, and I didn't realize that I had all those limits. So I worked with a business coach, and she actually had me do this exercise where I'm right-handed, but she had me write with my left hand all of those limiting beliefs. And I think the idea is that by writing with your left hand, you kind of have to slow down and think about what you're writing and realize how silly it is. And then I've put this circle around my life and my business. And I think what really broke me was that my limiting beliefs about myself were holding back my whole company. That's what really got me. I was like, whoa, I am holding back the team because I've put all these limits on what I can do and essentially what we can do as a result. So once I was able to break through that, I'd say now I still have limiting beliefs, but I see them for what they are. And I have mechanisms of kind of acknowledging them and moving past them. And I think I now know what to do with them, whereas before I didn't even realize I had them. So I think it's just a maturing in terms of how I see what the narrative that's going on in my head and my ability to learn from it and course correct. So now it's like I want to, we've got a team of 30 people now, and plus our contractors, and I dream daily about it being 60 and 90. And I don't necessarily want to infinitely scale because I'm really passionate about culture. And for me, I don't want to scale to a place where I can't maintain that. But I do dream bigger now about expansion and becoming a world-class agency for B2B software companies, and an example for other agencies of what that looks like. So bigger dreams.
Was your no ceilings motto from working with your coach? Is that where that came from?
It kind of came from that. Like it didn't necessarily come. It came from that season of my life. So yeah, I would say that I'm a big learner. So I'm always learning. I'm a sponge. I like to learn from anything and everything that I can. And you sift the bad and you hold on to the good. And I would say that there were some books that I read at that time, as well as some of the coaching. And then, yeah, just from reflecting on what I wanted, even for my own team, right? I have these amazing, smart people on my team, and I want them to see, I don't want them to be limited by their own beliefs either. So I think it came from a whole bunch of things, but yes, no ceilings. It's on the back of our crew necks, and it's definitely a driving motto for us here.
What are some, you mentioned books have been very helpful. You mentioned Niche Down. What are a couple other books that are some of your favorites?
I'm a big Todd Henry fan, like huge Todd Henry fan. So I feel like any book Todd Henry has written, I'm a huge fan of. For the agency world, herding tigers, not hurting, but herding. I always have to clarify that because people are like, what are you reading? But herding tigers was one of my favorites about leading creative people, and this idea that they're ferocious tigers and you're kind of unlocking all that they're capable of. And I think that book has been really helpful for me. But yeah, there's so many. I have a few of them here. One of my absolute favorites from a personal reflection perspective is Die Empty. And it just talks about like really leaving it all on the table and just using your life for a bigger purpose, and really just like serving and giving and just living big, versus wasting it, on whatever that could be, like whatever you want to waste it on. So I really love Die Empty. Amazing book, but I could go on. I have a long list.
I'm open. I have some Audible credits. Any others?
Yeah, there you go.
And Todd Henry, it looks like Herding Tigers, Die Empty, is the Accidental Creative, are all Todd Henry books as well.
Yeah. And for the agency world, a fellow agency leader here in Calgary actually introduced me to a book called Agencynomics. And that became a really handbook for me, because I think in any business, you're wondering, well, how do I know if my agency is performing or my business is performing? And it introduced me to some metrics that would help me assess the health of my agency, right? A lot of industries, there's a lot of information available publicly on those industries. And I'd say the agency world, there is some, but it's often less than what I see in other industries. And so Agencynomics has been a really helpful guide. Recently went to a conference for agencies and was introduced to a book called The Agency Secret. And that one is a new favorite, kind of a new handbook so I've got my handbooks and I'm always like pulling pieces from different books and trying to figure out how I can apply that to my leadership or my personal life or to the business and the agency. So those are a few others.
Interesting. No, thanks for sharing that. I've not heard of Agencynomics before. I don't know if that's one with Spencer Gallagher and Peter Poole. But it looks really interesting. So thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned team. Obviously, team is really important to you. Culture is really important to you. What are some of the key hires? And you don't have to say like people, but like positions that it started off you in college with a computer, and what were some of the key positions that you hired for along the way?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's been a few of them. Years and years ago, I had a sales guy who helped me, who was working with me on kind of building out the business. And while he was at Tiller, he actually introduced me to a guy named Brandon Nickerson, who is our COO today. And Brandon and I worked together in sort of a contract relationship for a number of years. And I used to be the person who was like, I can never have a business partner. I kept thinking that because I just seen so many business partnerships go wrong. And I didn't want that to be me. But after working with Brandon for a number of years, I just sensed this like deep value alignment. Like we both really care about doing things right and ethically had the same ethics and the same values. And so I wanted to lure him over to Tiller. He was doing his freelance business and I wanted to find a way for him to come and join me on my journey and together, thinking that the two of us would be more unstoppable than each of us independently. And so he was really key. So he joined me in 2017. And he has been instrumental in our growth and has kind of he helped me oversee the process, the creation of process and delivery and all of that. So that's been a huge win. And just the greatest partner you could have. I mean, just amazing. So he's been key. But I also have building on a leadership team has been really key. Because you don't like when you're building out a business and you start a business, you don't know, like, is it too soon? Is it too late? You're trying to figure out the timing of these things. And, it's me late at night at 1 a.m, Googling, like, what is an appropriate management to employee ratio? There's no real handbook for this, especially when I've never worked anywhere else except for, a golf course as a kid type thing, because I started this as my first kind of job, other than the health benefit company, I guess. So it's tough to know when to do these things. So I think the last couple of years have been really about learning how do you build a leadership team and how do you build a leadership philosophy that goes beyond yourself and how do you scale your influence through other leaders. And I've been super blessed to add 3 other leaders to the team outside of Brandon. So there's 5 of us in total. And it's been incredible because now I feel more confident that my entire team and entire organization has the attention that they deserve, because before it just felt so spread thin. We also have, so that's one key. And then the other one is fractional roles. I had never really understood the fractional concept before, but I was introduced to it, ended up with fractional CFO, fractional general counsel, fractional HR. And what that did is it allowed me to get access to lots of experience that I do not have at a reasonable cost that I could afford, right? So those roles I've learned from each and every one of those ladies in big ways. And especially on the finance side, that has just been absolutely instrumental. So big impact to Tiller by having that experience on the table.
I know, Chantelle, you have, by this time when this comes out, there's an article that is about competitive advantage and about intergenerational teams. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on how that's a competitive advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very passionate about this, and I kind of stumbled upon the passion mid journey as an entrepreneur because when I was younger, I mean, the average age was of Tiller was like 21. We're all these like essentially kids, not to be, demeaning, but it's kind of like kids trying to figure out how to do this. And it was sort of fun, but you just lack so much experience. And I think I dealt with a lot of intimidation on hiring people that are older than me, and just why would they want to work for me? Why would they want to be part of this? When they could do this or they could do that. So I struggled through a lot of those things mentally. But now we're in this really interesting point in time where there's 5 different generations working together in the workforce. I mean, that is really, really interesting. And so in the piece that you're referring to, I talk a lot about some of my hesitations and hangups in terms of building an intergenerational team, but how I really fell in love with it and started to see the value. Younger generations are bringing new, fresh ideas to the table, have high competence around using technology and all of that. But then you have, other generations that have so much experience and are also really keen to mentor and that's what they're oftentimes fulfilled by. And so bringing all those people together in the workforce is like a superpower if you can do it effectively and create space for everyone to feel like they have a voice. And I think it's going to be the way of the future, and the companies that can figure out how to leverage intergenerational teams are going to win. So now, I'm the youngest on our leadership team of 5. And we have age spanning, I think 25 to 63 now is the age span of our team, or maybe it was 23 to 63, somewhere in there. But a huge age span, which has been really instrumental to our growth.
A lot of times I find things that work through things that did not work. What are some things you have found in your experience that have not worked when you're getting together intergenerational teams and trying to create a cohesive unit? I don't know if there's any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say we have put so much emphasis on our culture that I think that it's not perfect, but it's created a place where I feel like people feel comfortable to come to the table and share their expertise and their ideas. So I think that having the right cultural foundation is really, really, really important, and the right values and all of that. For example, I have seen, this is not a blanket statement for every agency, but I've seen agencies where there's a lot of ego. And so we have really focused on no ego here at Tiller. And I think that not having ego is key to building an intergenerational team, because if there's ego, younger generations may dismiss the ideas of older generations, and older generations, if there's ego, might dismiss the value of an inexperienced contributor. So I think that is, we haven't really struggled with that because of the culture that we have. But I think that there are challenges, right? It's just about trying to create the right environment where people can succeed. I think one other thing too is that naturally there's a need for training for different generations depending on some of those gaps, right? If people are career pivoters. So I think we've learned a lot about how can we provide more training to support people at different points in their journeys, so we can help younger people in the ways that they need to be helped, and older generations in the ways that they need to be helped. So it's an ongoing learning process.
No, that makes perfect sense, actually, because it really comes down to the foundation, which is culture. So no matter who it is, how old they are, if they share those same values, then it makes for a cohesive team. If they don't,
Yes.
they don't. And you mentioned the ego part, which is interesting. I always find the interview and hiring process tricky. Are there anything, because people can interview well, like they can look it on paper, they can interview well, and then you find out later maybe it's not so good. So are there any things from the ego perspective that you have found in the interview process and hiring process that have helped you find the right fit?
Yeah, this has been an ongoing learning process for us because one of the things that I've struggled with in the past is to distinguish between ego and confidence. It can, like, especially in a single interaction, it can be really difficult to see. And so we've tried to, we haven't always got it right. Sometimes we've misinterpreted confidence for ego or ego for confidence. And I think through those experiences, we've learned how to better notice it. I think we also have expanded our recruitment process quite a bit to include more touch points. So we've added in, for example, we've added in something, the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment as part of our recruitment process. So all of our top candidates will complete that assessment. And one of the things that I love to ask after a candidate completes that assessment is, did anything surprise you about your Strengths Finder assessment? Because it's really talking about the person's strengths. And I find that question to be quite revealing. Because if the person is quite defensive about the Strengths Finder assessment, well, I feel like I should have been ranked higher on that, and whatever, it might reveal that there's some ego and not a growth mindset. So I think I'm trying to interview for growth mindset. If someone says, yeah, I was a little bit surprised about this, like I thought I might have got a bit stronger here, but in all fairness, maybe this is something that I could work on, because sometimes your strengths are your greatest weaknesses. Like, it all comes down to how they respond to those questions. And we also have redesigned a lot of our practices to really, like, a lot of our questions, a lot of the steps in our process to also try to gauge growth mindset, because that's really key. If someone has a growth mindset, it's hard to have ego, because you're constantly feeling like you could better yourself. Like, I want to get 1% better tomorrow on the next day. We've also introduced more group interviewing. So we have more people meet so that we have more points of view on that candidate. And so sometimes that takes the form of a design challenge for our designers, or for a developer, it might be a development challenge. We have different challenges, and then we have the candidate present their work to our team, and we see how that interaction goes. So those are just some practical ways.
I love that. No, thanks for sharing that. And also, definitely one of my favorite books by Carol Dweck, Growth Mindset. People can check that out if they want to learn more. But that makes perfect sense. And I love that strengths finders and asking about what surprised you. That's fantastic. I'd love to highlight, Chantelle, a little bit more about what you do as a company. And we talked about that a little bit, but I have some websites pulled up that I wanted to walk through, since you and the team are all about design, CRO, and everything like that. So I want to go through and some of these sites, and you can tell us about the user experience and some of the things that are on here that are great, and also some things that maybe you'd recommend testing. I know Waitwell is one company you've worked with.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So Waitwell is a really exciting Calgary success story in the tech space. And they're a queue management solution, as you can see from the headline there. So essentially, any business or healthcare organization or educational organization that has long lines at their place of business or place of operation could benefit from a queue management system that goes beyond the tickets that we used to get when we go into the registry or whatever it might be to renew your driver's license or whatever. So Waitwell is an exciting Calgary success story. We helped them with their brand and their website, and really helped elevate things for them. And some things worth noting, I'd say, like, you can see in some of the work that we've done for them, really heavy focus on social proof. That's really, really important. So you can see the 5 stars, the G2, you can see some stats just below the primary focus area here that are kind of explaining how they perform for their website, adding in customer testimonials. Things like that are really helping to provide proof as to the headlines, right? So we always try to pair credibility and social proof with headlines so that we can get people to convert. So that's kind of a key piece here. Now, given this website launched very recently, definitely need a little bit of time to see how things do perform. But once we have a little bit of data to go off of, there's different things that we can do. For example, we can test different CTA buttons and different blocks. So that talk to sales button that you're hovering over, and those tour Waitwell, those are examples of that. So there's different call to actions. And you can use, whether the button is filled or not filled, color choices, different things like that to try and provide emphasis on these call to actions. And then we also have built out, if you go to the solutions tab there at the top, you can kind of see that we built out different solutions by use case, industry, and company size, because it's really important that when a potential buyer lands on this website, they can see themselves quickly in the website and see a solution for their pain. So this is just sort of this strategy that we apply to this. Most of these customers are high problem aware. They already know that they have a problem, long lines. So when they come here, we can kind of lean into differentiators, lean into the value prop, and try and convert them relatively quickly versus having to spend time educating them on their problem. So that's kind of things we were thinking about when we created this.
Yeah, it really is beneficial if they serve specific niches and they're like, well, we don't want to just focus on healthcare. We also have higher education, retail, but the client wants, or the customer wants them to feel like they know me, they're speaking directly to me. And when you go on here, obviously healthcare has words like patients on there, where the other ones won't have that on there. Wait times is specifically. So waiting rooms, where it seems like, the government or higher education is not going to have the same language.
That's right.
This is a lot to build out. This is quite a project, because each of these have its own, kind of nuances.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one common pattern with B2B SaaS companies. Oftentimes, there are a number of audiences or buyers, right? Because the B2B buying process is quite complex. Some recent data from Gartner report showed that I think it's 6 to 9 or 7 to 10 stakeholders are involved in the buying process. So the website naturally has to appeal to all of those different audiences. And that can be challenging because you have one website, but you need to serve multiple audiences, multiple user journeys. So this solution-based approach does help with achieving that.
Yeah, even from like you mentioned, company size, an enterprise, like, oh, they only work with small and medium businesses. They don't work with our company, or the opposite. Oh, they're too big for us. They only work with enterprises. So it's really interesting how this has kind of served different specific audiences. So I get the, really a lot of credibility, social proof, testing calls to action. I have another one pulled up. Anything else on this one that we should note?
Maybe it wouldn't hurt just clicking on the pricing page momentarily here, because pricing in B2B SaaS, again, is always a challenge to figure out how do you present your pricing, because there's usually so many options. So again, there's some opportunities for testing on the pricing page that we could always explore. Again, right now we're in a phase of trying to see how this performs. But you can kind of see how do you present a lot of information in a clear way. Most B2B SaaS companies have an enterprise option. So it's like, there is still a path of getting custom pricing in certain cases. On this website, we were trying to also highlight some of the add-ons that they have just below this section here, so that people feel that they can, it's actually just below that. Sorry, there you are. Some additional add-ons. And then we also have a feature comparison on this website to kind of enable a buyer to make better comparisons off the top. So there's lots of different ways to optimize pricing pages. It can be tricky to get the content clear and concise. And this product has a lot of different customization flexibility for the organizations that are their clients. So that was a challenge. So there's probably testing opportunity on pricing pages too.
Yeah, it's good. It's tough because you want to give them as much information as possible. So when they come to you, they have a lot of their questions answered that you don't have to repeat.
Yeah.
But you don't want to overwhelm people either.
Exactly.
What's your thought of? I mean, this one obviously includes some pricing on the page. I've seen someone shared a site with me the other day. It was a B2B SaaS company, and they didn't have pricing on it. And my mind's always like, okay, well, that means it's maybe enterprise level. It's going to be a large ticket item. Any thoughts on, even in a large B2B SaaS, on putting pricing versus non? Obviously, they have kind of custom here, but they do put pricing, some at least baseline pricing. Do you find is there a cutoff? Like, okay, here's where we wouldn't recommend putting pricing. Are there any kind of best practices or rules around the B2B SaaS and how people put what they display on the website about pricing?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't consider myself a B2B SaaS pricing expert, although we do weigh in often with clients, but there's a lot of a lot of nuance to that, especially if organizations are wanting to price test on their customer success or sales teams. But I will say, probably my best piece of advice is to look at what the competitors are doing, because if you've got 5 competitors and 4 of them are doing it and you're not, it's going to be difficult to perform against them. Now, if none of them are doing it and you decide to do it, you might also separate yourself from the pack and it might help you gain traction. So it doesn't mean do what the pack is doing, but think about it in terms of differentiation. And I definitely would recommend doing that. I think because most B2B buyers are more interested in self-serve these days, I think if you can put price on your website, it will really help you, because you're going to get higher quality leads because they already have a general sense of price. So when they actually reach out, they're more likely to be qualified.
Chantelle, I know we have 2 minutes and I
Yeah.
know we've got our call. So we're going to do rapid fire, maybe 1 minute
Yeah,
each.
sure.
And we're going to just do a quick, what are some things you really like? Maybe some things that you test, and maybe we'll start
Sure.
with Good Lawyer.
Yeah, sure. Good Lawyer, another amazing Calgary success story. And we're actually a client of Good Lawyers, so make use of their fractional legal talent. But this website's really interesting. I think generally speaking, they've definitely highlighted social proof throughout. But the website is quite lean. So it does leave people wanting, especially what I just said about B2B software buyers being more self-serve. There's a lot of links down in the footer. So the website is actually bigger than it looks in some ways. But again, I think, there's some opportunity to have a more expansive sitemap here, and probably more of a thought leadership play, so that companies can actually learn more about the company and the solutions. So they've kind of got to that with the 4 companies piece and those 3 use case pages, startup, scale-ups in-house. But they could get more industry specific, make use of case studies. There's a lot of opportunity to expand this and probably drive higher performance. Could also test Get Started, because Get Started is not a bad call to action, but it might be interesting to see how it performs against a different call to action, like book a consultation or whatever it might be. So there could be opportunities to test that.
Awesome. Love it. I know you've got to hop off. The other one I was going to ask about was Valley Mail, but I know I think the Wait Well was of similar. So I don't know if there's any quick thoughts on that, or we should just
Yeah, I think this one was just interesting from the standpoint of multiple audiences. So this company was in a place where they were appealing to an IT buyer and had to expand to also appeal to an email marketing buyer. And it's also highly technical. So you have the way that you have to speak to an IT buyer versus an email marketing buyer is very, very different. And so we help them make that evolution here. And they have some similar structures on the solutions pages. I love the why Valley Mail page, probably worth noting. This is a page I love to see on B2B SaaS company websites, and it's not always the right solution. But I think taking a page to highlight those differentiators, why us over someone else. They have tons of social proof, partners that Microsoft and Google are partners. All of those things are increasing credibility. So there's definitely a valuable page to have on your website. And when you're appealing to an IT buyer, you really need to make sure that you address all their security concerns and considerations in advance. So again, that's something that we've tried to do with Valley Mail very effectively right off the top.
Chantelle, I want to be the first one. I want to be the first one to thank you. This has been tremendously helpful. I want to encourage people to check out your website, tillerdigital.com, to learn more. And we'll see everyone next time. Chantelle, thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.